I got off of work at around 10 p.m. and headed out. I live alone and always make sure my front door is locked before I leave for work. When I got home, the door was unlocked. I knew for a fact I locked it when I left because, like I stated, I always lock it. I also have severe OCD and would not have forgotten to lock my door as I am too obsessed with my routine to forget. I was thoroughly unsettled by this and immediately retrieved my 9mm pistol from the drawer next to my front door. I set the bag of fast food I had picked up down and looked around the dark living room, fumbling for the light switch. Once the light flicked on, to my utter horror, my apartment was in complete disarray. Paperwork strewn all about the floor that had been put away in my office, and my social security card and birth certificate were among the mess. I quickly made my way to my office, and once I entered the room, I found all the drawers were open and my computer had been turned on and was on the lock screen as if somebody had tried to get into my computer. I checked the rest of my apartment and didn't find anybody. I put my gun back and immediately phoned the police. They arrived fairly quickly and took a report of the break-in. They asked me if I had any enemies or if I had made anyone mad recently, to which I responded that I hadn't. No such thing had occurred, and furthermore, I am not the type to have quarrels with people. I was quite dumbstruck by what I had come home to. I cleaned up the mess and attempted to sleep, but tossed and turned most of the night while lying with my gun under my pillow. I would like to add that I am also a very paranoid person, so the whole thing naturally had me extremely freaked out, and every night I go to bed, I have my gun under my pillow now. The next day I had off, so I left to go hiking with my girlfriend. We started dating 6 months ago. I left around 9 a.m. and stopped by the Starbucks next to my apartment. While I sat in the busy drive-thru line, I looked up and noticed a man staring at me from across the street on the same side as my apartment complex. The thing that was the most interesting about this man was how much of a resemblance to me he bared. This guy had the same hair as me, was about the same height and weight, wore glasses like me, and looked to be about the same age as me too. He didn't appear to have any expression on his face and just stood there still as a statue staring at me. It was my turn to get my order, so I grabbed my coffee, and when I went to pull out of the drive-thru, the man was gone. The day went as planned, and my girlfriend and I had a great day together. I told her about the incident at my apartment and the man who looked like me, and she joked that perhaps my doppelganger had broken into my apartment. After I parted ways with my girlfriend, I made my way home. I was a little bit nervous to return home, fearing whoever had broken into my apartment might have returned. Whatever they were there for that night, they seemed to be looking for something. I arrived back at my apartment and made my way to my apartment unit. I live upstairs, and as I approached the stairs to my front door, I heard somebody coming down the stairs. I was still a good distance from the stairwell and was alarmed, as I didn't have a neighbor that lived upstairs. Therefore, nobody should have been coming down those stairs. I stopped to see who it was, and to my shock, it was none other than the same man I had seen earlier that morning. He walked quickly and looked down as he walked. I shouted at him to stop, but as soon as he heard me, he took off running and hopped the fence that separates the apartment complex from a large field and disappeared into the night. I ran upstairs to my apartment and tried the doorknob, which was once again unlocked. I went inside and was horrified. All the walls in my living room were pictures of me and my girlfriend from that day. Pictures that looked as if they had been taken right from the tree line next to the trail she and I were on. I once again called the police to report the break-in. They came and searched the apartment as well as the entire complex. I told them about the man I had seen running into the field. They searched the field and returned with a pair of eyeglasses and a wig. The police took the items they found into evidence and opened a case. They stationed 2 police cars outside my apartment and informed the apartment manager about what was going on. It's been almost a week since all of this started, and nothing else has happened since. No more random break-ins or creepy photos of me and my girlfriend. I've also been staying with a coworker of mine until things die down. I have no idea why. Whoever is doing this is targeting me. Based on the items the police found in the field, my guess is this person is actually pretending to be me for some odd reason. I don't know what any of this means. I'll be sure to give an update if anything else happens. When I was a teenager, I dated a guy a couple years older than me that we'll call Nate. He was always exceptionally sweet and would tell me how I deserved the world. We never really broke up. He would just move away, and it would be agreed that we wouldn't date anymore. We would always end up connecting back with each other no matter what. Then when I was 17, he went to jail for stabbing his stepdad. We hadn't seen each other in almost a year at that point. Afterwards, he would never talk about it in detail, but he would explain that he saw no choice at the time. His stepdad even went to his court hearings and stated that he wasn't to blame and that he made the mistake of cornering him in a violent rage. When he got out of jail, he seemed to be a different person. He was much more mature. He got a well-paying job right away, and he discovered the love of cooking, and he was clean and organized and well-read. He looked me up the first day he got back to town, and we slowly started developing a friendship and eventually started casually dating. He began staying at my home on weekends, and then after a few months he needed a place to stay for a month and a half between selling his trailer and moving into a nicer rental. And things honestly seemed to be really good. We were talking about maybe moving in together, and he would hint at the idea of proposing. Then one day he started drinking again and became unsettling and weird. Almost immediately after he started drinking, he began lying, and I started to get the big heebie-jeebies. He would say he was leaving for work, but then an hour later, his coworker would come to the door and ask where he was. When I would ask him about it, instead of calmly explaining that he was at his mom's on the way to work or something, he would storm off and ignore my calls for days. I immediately ended the relationship, telling him he could stay at his mom's until his place was move-in ready. A friend of mine came over to my house and helped me neatly pack up all of his stuff, and we dropped it off at his mom's for him. I can't tell you exactly why, but we also decided to put chain locks on the door that Nate had a key to, because even though he had given my key back, I had a completely unfounded suspicion that he made a copy without telling me. Sure enough, that night, Nate came to my door without calling and without knocking and tried to let himself in. I had rested my skateboard against the door, so when it opened, I heard the crash. I heard him cuss under his breath and leave. The next day I came home from walking my dog with a male friend who I had been friends with my entire life and would hang out with the both of us. There was a picture I had painted for Nate on the front porch of my house. It had blood splattered all over it. I asked my friend what I should do, and he was honestly kind of horrified. It was too big to fit in the garbage can, and I didn't want his blood-covered painting just sitting around my house, so later that night we ended up burning it in the outdoor fireplace. A few days later, Nate called me and asked if he could come over later and talk. I said that it was fine, and he told me he would be over at about 7 p.m. At 8:30, he hadn't called or shown up, so I was sitting at my computer when I got a call from my aunt who had a police scanner. Nate had apparently broken into a woman's house with a gun, and she had shot at him with a shotgun. The police eventually caught him running in the direction of my house. He went back to jail, but only for about 6 months since they couldn't find the gun he had, and because the woman whose house he broke into didn't want to cooperate with the police. He ended up getting a very light charge. Around this time, I had started dating somebody else. We'll call him Sam. And the very first time we were out around town together, Nate saw us and came over and ripped his shirt off, challenging Sam to a fight. Sam responded just by kind of chuckling in discomfort, and we got back into the car and left. This became a semi-regular occurrence, and then one night we were cuddled up in my living room watching TV, and we heard something hit the patio window really loudly. We went and looked around, expecting there to be a bird or something, but we couldn't find anything. The next day after Sam had left, I had gone outside onto the small patio, and in the light of the day, I could see what we had missed the night before. It was a bullet for a hunting rifle. It looked like it had been thrown at the window from over the fence. I ended up moving away and marrying Sam. Nate actually randomly. He showed up once when we were meeting up with an all-around mutual friend, and it was pretty weird. But it was pretty coincidental, so we shrugged it off. A little while later, Nate went back to jail for breaking into another woman's house. He was released after a certain amount of time after that as well. Then almost immediately after his release, he was all over national news because he had been caught trying to kidnap multiple children, going so far as to take one child and choke them until the father by coincidence found them and was able to pull him off of him. The boy survived, but he was unconscious for a while. He suffered no brain damage, but was pretty shocked and likely will be for life. After Nate was incarcerated for that, he was arrested right after his release for the murder of a woman in the town he had grown up in several years earlier because they had only discovered her remains while he was in jail. Details were never publicly released because the trial is still ongoing, but the rumor is that he broke into her house, having been casual acquaintances with her, and killed her and then moved her body to a small forested area on a mutual friend's parents' house. He also allegedly killed his cellmate while he was in jail, but he was found not guilty because the jail mishandled a bunch of the evidence and the prison guards mixed up their stories a bit, so the case couldn't prove he did it beyond a reasonable doubt. His cellmate was just a poor young kid, barely 19, in jail for theft. Of course, the kid should have gone to jail, but in no way should have that been a death sentence. While he's in jail, he has apparently attacked multiple female prison guards by choking them. There are, of course, rumors around town that some other missing people were also his doing. Yeah, there's a bunch more true stories about women catching him, trying to break into their house that never made it to court because they didn't know who it was at the time, so police had no one to look into. And they only realized it was Nate when his face became plastered all over the media. I often think of the fact that I intimately knew this person, and sometimes I feel guilty for not having seen the signs. Other times I feel creeped out that I could have been a victim of this. I feel like I somehow should have known that I was living with a potential serial killer, but until he started drinking, he truly seemed like a stand-up guy that had made bad decisions and was just doing his best to make a decent life for himself. Up until very recently, I never spoke about him or even acknowledged that I knew him. Obviously, my husband knows, but he knows it makes me uncomfortable and we just don't discuss it. I guess I just wanted to share this creepy encounter story here, as a way to process it. Hey guys, the first time I shared on Reddit, I was really encouraged by the upvotes and comments you guys left. That post was about some experiences I had abroad, but to really live up to my username, I have stories about both my farm and my boyfriend's farm that might be interesting to you. Farms have a lot of history. My family has been farming in the exact same spot since the 1870s, when my family arrived from Germany, and his family has been farming in the same area since the 1930s. Therefore, they have lots of tills. My boyfriend's dad, I'll call him my father-in-law, because he basically is. I swear he has seen everything at least once and has the most interesting stories. I'll share a couple of his to start. For context, my boyfriend's family farms on both sides of the Iowa and Missouri border since they live fairly close to the state line. They have corn, soybeans, and beef cattle on pasture. I particularly love the cattle because I love getting to jump in the Ranger and ride around the pasture with my boyfriend to check on the cows. We do this almost every night in the spring and summer, and even fall, to make sure they are healthy and not injured, and to account for the calves. Make sure they have enough grass and look to see if there are any holes or breaks in the fences. In the wintertime, they get moved to a lot with a covered shed to protect them from the elements, so they are not in the pasture and we feed them hay. Anyway, in the mid-2000s, my father-in-law was out in the wooded area of the cattle pasture. The trees are quite dense here, and it often serves as a great deer hunting spot in the late fall or winter once the cows have been moved to the winter lot. He was setting up trail cameras in the woods to watch deer in preparation for hunting season that fall. After some time, he came back out to get the card out of the camera to see if there were any big bucks roaming around. When he took a look at some of the pictures, he saw that there had been an unusual man back there. Trespassers aren't all that uncommon, and often it's just an annoyance rather than cause for concern. There was no way to tell who it was, so he just forgot about it. A few days later, he went back to hang the camera back up in the tree. When my father-in-law went back a second time about a week later to get the camera to see the pictures, somebody had dug 3 makeshift graves in the back corner of the pasture. At the head of each grave was a wooden cross with a first name on it. He unfortunately didn't catch the man on trail camera, but he alerted the police about the situation. I think based on the names of the crosses, the police had an idea of who it could have been. The rural Midwest is smaller than you think for being so vast. My father-in-law wasn't really sure what came of that and never looked too much into it. But if he hadn't discovered those graves in the pasture and alerted the police, they might have been filled. For the second story, my father-in-law had some farms in Missouri that were bordered by the Missouri River. The Missouri River flows down through the Dakotas, along the Iowa and Nebraska border, and then at Kansas City, it takes a turn and divides the state of Missouri into two, until it reaches the Mississippi River. One spring in the late 1900s, he was out in a field next to the Missouri River planting corn. This was before all the current high-tech tools that farmers have at their disposal now, which can tell you if you have an issue with your machine right from the cab. He thought that his planter was having some issues, so he jumped out to check if something was broken. When he got out of his tractor, he noticed a really strange smell. A bad smell. If you know anything about farming, planting season is a fast-paced time to try to beat the weather, and he was more concerned about getting his crop planted than investigating. He just assumed that it was a dead deer washed up in the river and continued on until he thought the planter was having problems again a few hours later. This time, he was on the end of the field closer to the river. The smell was stronger and unlike anything he had experienced before. They continued on that day, working until one of the hired men asked if anybody noticed the bizarre smell coming from the river. My father-in-law said he had and wondered to them if it was a dead deer, but usually deer didn't stink quite like this. One of the hired men wandered across the field to the edge of the river. It's not like a nice sandy beach that touches the ground to make a shoreline. Often, it is a rocky or steep overlook many feet down to the river below, to get a closer look. At the bottom, he saw what he thought was an animal tangled in the branches washed up by the river. Looking closer, he realized it was a person. They immediately called the police. Turns out, it was a missing woman who was a known prostitute from Kansas City who had made it this far downstream. I cannot find the exact article or name, and I don't know if the police ever told my father-in-law her name, even though they briefly questioned him, but I do know there are a few articles of women being found on the river east of Kansas City in the late 1990s. Those are the two I'll share for now. Let me know if you're interested in any more strange tales from many years of farming. I was a late bloomer in terms of sexuality. I had a traumatic experience that made me not want to date much in high school. So it's surprising that not even a year after graduating, I was so excited to date Jeff. He was older than me by a few years and messaged me on MySpace that he thought I was pretty and wanted to hang out. We went on a few dates and held hands and stuff. He thought it was cute that I had never been kissed before. Things seemed to be okay, and he said he respected that I wanted to go very slow. One night he acted really strange. His friend Matt was over and they kept joking that they should take me to see their friend. I knew something was off because they kept joking that they shouldn't do it, that I was too pure and I would freak out. This was over 10 years ago, so I'm not 100% sure, but I don't remember agreeing to go to this guy's house. I remember asking them to take me home. I was uncomfortable with it and I didn't want to meet this dude. This was supposed to be a date night. Matt wasn't even supposed to be there, and now I'm going to see some other guy. My intuition told me something was off about it. The drive was up a long, unlit, unpaved road up a mountain. On the way, Jeff and Matt were saying things like, "Oh man, she's not going to be your girlfriend after this," and "Dude, we're going to hell for this." I tried to act like I wasn't crying in fear in the back seat. All I asked was where we were going, which they laughed at. I stayed silent and tried to focus on anything that could tell me where we were going, but it was in a rural area I've never been to before. We got to the house. A single-story 2-bedroom surrounded by nothing but unlit nothingness. The friend was an older man, probably late 30s, who I was told was a porn producer. He showed me his red room and Jeff pushed me into it. I let out the terrified scream I've been holding in the entire time. I could still hear how it sounded. It was awful. They all laughed. I walked to the couch in the living room and stayed there the entire night. I was too afraid to even use the bathroom. The rest of the night was spent with him drinking beer while I stood on the couch digging my nails into the palms of my hands, trying not to cry. I didn't eat or drink anything that was offered. Matt mentioned that Jeff used to bring his girls to this house to have sex. Their creepy old friend joked that he could record it. Lots of uncomfortable sex jokes. The creepy old guy told me that virgins can make a lot of money doing porn, like he was doing me a favor. It was almost half my life ago, but I remember exactly how that room smelled, how the fake leather couch felt, and how time seemed to move at an inconsistent speed. I don't remember how I responded to that, but he backed off. Nothing bad happened that night, but when I got home, I collapsed in the shower crying. I don't know why I was taken to that house. After that night, Jeff's tune changed from "we can go at whatever speed you want" to "this trauma is really holding you back, you just need to have sex and get it over with." Looking back, I'm just really grateful I listened to my intuition and ended things with Jeff and cut ties with all of his friends. My current boyfriend and I were talking about weird things that happened to us, and I remember this night. When I told him, he looked horrified, and it occurred to me that night could have gone very differently. First time poster here, long time reader. Sorry if this is too long, I really don't want to bore anyone. I also wanted to say that this story is objectively true, and I tried not to fluff anything to make it seem worse than it was, so yeah, here we go. About 2 years ago, I was long distance dating a guy who was my first love. He loved me too, but unfortunately, due to the long distance and his addiction problems, we had to break it off. As most people react when their relationship or love ends, especially in some cases when it's the first, they enter weeks of depression or denial. I had trouble sleeping for at least a month. This caused me to be late to work almost every day, and as a result, I received a warning that if I didn't fix my attendance issues, then I would be let go. I immediately forced myself to try to occupy my time with my freelance illustration and really attempted to go to bed early. The first couple of days it was rough, but I kept at it. The first night I remember getting work done and sleeping on time was the night it happened. Quick backstory. My roommate and I lived in a house separated into separate living spaces. One for our friends that rented the upstairs and one for us downstairs. I figured I should mention this because our windows, for example, were very easily accessible and unfortunately didn't have locks. We also had a backyard that was fenced off, but like the windows, the fence door was also lock-free. Now to what happened. I was asleep, but due to being a light sleeper and being incredibly heartbroken, I easily awoke to lights coming through the blinds of my bedroom window. Luckily, my bed was adjacent to the window, so they didn't see me. I was still a little bit foggy from being sleep deprived, and because of the melatonin, but forced myself up when whispering voices came from the people holding the flashlights. The people. There were at least 3 of them. It was all such a blur that I can't really remember the detail, but they seemed to be wearing all black and began to move towards the fence of our backyard. I immediately began to feel so emotional at being woken up, and my body went into autopilot. I grabbed my phone and box cutter. I worked at Trader Joe's, where we have to use them every day, and woke my roommate up. I dialed 911 and handed him the phone to tell the police people were attempting to break in. My amazing roommate seemed to understand immediately, despite being shaken awake. I pounded my way to the kitchen, where we had a huge window looking into the backyard, and my adrenaline pumped as I saw the strangers make their way through the fence, their flashlights bobbing around. It was this moment that triggered me into a fit of tears. Not the cute one drop going down my cheek kind, but the type where rivers of tears come down my face, making it difficult for me to see. I mean, my boyfriend who loved left me. I hadn't been able to sleep, the job I left is threatening to fire me, and now these assholes woke me up and are trying to take what little we have. They began to look through our backyard shed, which like an idiot we haven't attached a padlock to. Inside was the bike my dad bought for me, the bikes of our friends who lived upstairs, and old TVs, etc. One of the intruders made their way to our back door, and in a fit of tears and anger, I beat them to it. I flicked our kitchen lights on and swung open the door. The stranger was right in front of me, and jumped backwards. I mean, to be fair, I was holding an incredibly sharp extended box cutter and was crying really badly. I started yelling at them about being woken up and depressed, and how dare they try to rob someone who was barely keeping it together. I was essentially yelling to no one after a couple of seconds because they booked it as soon as I confronted them. The police came, took our statement, asked for descriptions, and said they would look around. They never found anybody, probably because I didn't follow the strangers to see how they got to our place. If so, I could have gotten a license plate or something. It didn't occur to me until afterwards that I should have told them the police are coming, or worried that they might have hurt me and, more importantly, my roommate. Looking back, I feel really bad about risking our lives like that. I really don't know what came over me, but I was holding in so much sadness and anger that these people caused me to let it out. Anyway, that's what happened. I've learned a lot since then, like having our landlord install locks for our windows, and seeing a therapist. It may have worked out for me, but to anybody reading this or listening, please don't be as stupid as me, especially if there are other people whose lives are at stake. I should have waited inside for the police or yelled at them through the window, but I didn't. So yeah, if the people who tried to break into our home are reading this, I hope we never encounter each other again, and I assume the feeling is mutual. I and my husband and daughter moved into the house next door only a month ago, and he never seemed that interested in talking to me until he saw her, and it's worrying me. When we were working outside on a flower bed that faces his house, he came over to talk. Now he's done this twice, mind you, so being completely honest, it didn't seem that weird to me at first, until he acted kind of strangely when he saw her. He got wide-eyed and began acting nervous all of a sudden, and I didn't see the connection until I realized he kept glancing or staring at her while talking to me. He was very flustered and hardly ever looked away, and it started making me uncomfortable. I told her to just go inside and that she'd helped me enough with the bed because I didn't like how he was acting, and I could tell she was starting to get creeped out too. He looks to be 35 to 40, I think, which is just adding to the creepiness of it all. There were a few instances after this where she went outside to check the mail or to take the trash, and he'd come outside every time, trying to talk or just stand there staring at her and saying nothing. After this, she stopped going out the front door and started going out the back door when helping me with the garden or sometimes to get something from our shed. But it wasn't long before he caught on to this as well, because he'd be standing there behind the fence just staring the same way, which means he literally is watching for her to come outside all through the day. She's so creeped out now that the only time she leaves the house is with friends or to go to work. She's not even comfortable standing outside anymore. And to make things worse, now he started coming over every other day or so to knock on our door to talk, and always ends it with asking questions about her, which are very personal questions, might I add. We've gotten to the point where we don't even answer the door when it's him because it's so weird. The whole thing is just creeping me out because my husband is at work most of the time, and I feel like I can't call the police because he hasn't technically done anything illegal. So what should I do? My friends Jessica, 27 female, and James, 30 male, have been together for 6 years and have lived in their house for over a year now. I'm over quite often. I have been friends and co-workers with Jessica for 4 years. They are wonderful. They have kind of adopted me in a way, and they keep me alive by feeding me a few times a week. So I was over for dinner after work a few weeks ago. We all got to their place within minutes of each other. We all drank and caught up. After a little while, James went outside to grill up some steaks, came in and asked why I kissed the door. I'm pretty confused and go over to the sliding glass door where he is. Sure as the world, there is a kiss print on the outside of the door, lipstick and everything. A few things. James and Jessica are both shorter than I am. He's about 5'8", she's 5'2", and I'm 5'11". The kiss print was at a height that, if I popped up on the balls of my feet, I could reach that spot with my lips, far above where Jessica could reach, and as much as I loved the thought of James in bubblegum pink lipstick, he couldn't reach it either. I haven't worn makeup in many, many years. I don't even own any. I think I have some mascara and an ancient eyeshadow palette, maybe. They both thought it was me playing a prank. After all, Jessica owns lipstick. I could have just been trying to freak them out. Spoilers, though. I'm not. But I am a smoker, so I do frequent their back porch through that door. Besides, it's pretty difficult to get on their porch. We got 3 sides, right? Well, the right side is sort of a balcony with a 30-foot or so drop. The left side has a 10-foot drop or so, with the fence, and inside the fence is immediately James' grill and some workout equipment. It's a pretty narrow space and wouldn't be easily navigated with all that junk there. Plus, it's pretty high up. The front of the porch would be the easiest way to get in, but you would have to be dedicated. They have thick, tall boxwood hedges along with the fence, so you get pretty scraped up. At this point, I'm thinking that Jessica just climbed on a chair and kissed the glass. She's pranking me. Well, James cleaned off the glass, and we went on with our night. A few nights later, I'm back at their place. I was going out for a smoke when I saw a kiss on the glass in the same place as nude shade lipstick. About a foot below the lip print, there was a smudgy heart. I'm not sure if this person had really greasy hands or if they used spit or something, but it was extra creepy. I pointed it out to my friends, and again they thought it was me. James even insisted I clean it off the glass. Neither James nor Jessica had ever been one to prank, and neither have I. But I still felt like the most logical explanation was Jessica trying to prank James and me by setting me up or something. The next time it happened, a few days later, when I hadn't been there for a while, Jessica called me. She was a little accusatory and rattled. I do have a key to their house, and she asked if I'd use it to kiss the glass again, because when they woke up, she noticed that there was a lip print on the door. I told her it wasn't me and she let it go, but I could tell she still thought it was me. At this point, I'm not really thinking it's her. Like it could be, but it definitely seems like it's time to give it up already. She seemed genuinely mad at me, and it didn't seem funny at all. It happened a couple more times. Once more while I was over. There was a break for about a week, and then again when I hadn't been there. I had to go to another state for work, and while I was gone, Jessica video called me. She saw me in my hotel room and just started freaking out. She said this whole time she was really holding out hope that this was me, even though it wasn't funny. At least it wouldn't be terrifying. Alas, I am 1,000 miles away, and there is a kiss print on her back door with a heart underneath. She apologized to me for being so adamant that it was me. She just didn't want to be wrong. I told her it's okay and to call the police. She did. They came several hours later, looked around for 5 minutes, and pretty much told her that was weird. Told her she can take pictures and submit them online to them, and said they probably can't through the hedges and over the fence. Thank you, you two specific boys in blue. Big help. So we are all completely freaked out. I suppose it's possible that it is her and or James, and neither of them knows when to call it quits, but I really don't think it is. Somebody is really dedicated to giving them kisses. They ordered a camera. Came a couple of days ago, and I put it on the porch. So far, nothing. I'll let you know if they see anyone. I'm 21, and I want to start by saying that Mr. Hessler came to my dad's retirement party 4 years ago and brought a casserole. I've been sitting with this for a while. Him standing in our kitchen holding a glass of lemonade, making small talk with my uncles like a completely normal human being. He lived next door my entire life. Shoveled our driveway once when my dad threw his back out. Waved every single morning from his driveway for as long as I can remember. That kind of neighbor. The background furniture of a childhood. Present enough to feel safe and unremarkable enough that you never actually look at him though. I'm home for the summer between junior and senior years. My parents left for a 2-week trip to Europe in late June. Their first real vacation in years, and I stayed behind because I had a remote internship running and the timing didn't work. I'd been home alone before plenty of times. I was fine with it. Our neighborhood is quiet and I know everyone on the street, and The house has always felt like the safest place I know. That part is hard to think about now. First thing I noticed was the dirt. I went out to the backyard maybe 4 days after my parents left to check on the garden my mom had going along the back fence, and there was a section in the far left corner that looked wrong. Dirt was pushed up on my side in a small mound, and the grass around it was flattened and pressed down in a path that ran from the fence base towards the pool area. I crouched down and looked at it, and the bottom of the fence panel had been lifted. The gap underneath was wider than it should have been, like something had pushed through repeatedly. I figured an animal, like raccoon, groundhog, or something that found a way under. I made a mental note to tell my dad and went back inside. Over the next few days, other things shifted. The pool cover I had left draped over the edge each night was moved in the morning, folded back in a way I hadn't left it, and a lawn chair that lived on the left side of the pool deck was on the right now. Also, a towel I'd hung over the ladder was on the ground. I started keeping loose track in my head without fully committing to what I was tracking or why. On the 5th night, I set my phone up on my bedroom windowsill, angled at the backyard, and left it recording and went to sleep. I watched the footage the next morning with a coffee I didn't end up drinking. At 2 in the morning, the fence panel on the far left corner lifted from the bottom and a man crawled through into my backyard. He moved slowly and carefully, crossed the yard in a wide arc that kept him away from the motion sensor light above the back door, and came to the pool area and sat down on the lawn chair closest to the pool. He sat there for 38 minutes. I timed it, just sitting in my backyard in the dark, looking at the pool and the house. Then he got up and crossed back to the fence and crawled out, and the panel dropped back into place. I watched it a few times. I needed to know who it was before I called. The footage was dark and grainy, and the angle wasn't great, and I just needed to be sure. I set the camera up again the next night, but this time I left the back porch light on low and positioned the phone at a better angle. In the morning, I sat on my bed and watched a man crawl through my fence and cross my backyard and sit in my lawn chair for 41 minutes, and I could see his face clearly enough. Mr. Hessler. I called the police and 2 officers came, and I showed them both videos. They watched them twice and said they'd go speak to him. They came back 40-ish minutes later and said that he denied it and claimed the footage was too unclear to identify him definitively, and that without better evidence, they couldn't act beyond filing a report and advising me to look into a restraining order. I was furious. That afternoon was hot and genuinely suffocating, and I made a decision that felt like taking something back. I put my suit on and went out to the pool and got in. My backyard, my pool, my summer. I was not going to let a man I'd known my whole life make me afraid of my own yard in the middle of the afternoon. I was in the water maybe 10 minutes when I noticed him. Mr. Hessler was in his backyard along the fence line on his side with a pair of hedge clippers in his hand. But he wasn't clipping anything. He was standing facing my direction with the clippers at his side. He was not looking at me directly, chin slightly down, but his body was oriented towards the pool and he wasn't moving. I got out of the pool and went inside and locked the back door and stood in my kitchen for a minute, breathing. Then I went upstairs to my bedroom and looked out the window at the backyard. He was at the fence, both hands on the top of it, arms straight, leaning slightly forward, looking at the pool. Just standing there on his side of the fence in broad daylight with his hands gripping the top board, staring at the water where I had been 60 seconds ago. Then he looked up, straight up at my bedroom window, directly at me standing there looking down at him. No pretending and no looking away, no acting like he hadn't been watching. He just looked up at me with both hands still on the fence and held it. I stepped back from the window and called the police again and then told them what was going on. That I had it on my phone camera still running on the windowsill. They came back faster this time. I had clear daylight footage of him standing at the fence staring at my pool and then looking up at my window. That combined with the night footage was enough for them to go back to his property with more authority. They were over there for a long time. A detective knocked on my door about 2 hours later and asked if she could come in and sit down, the way she made me sit down before she did. Along the inside of Mr. Hessler's fence, on his side directly adjacent to the gap he'd been crawling through, they had found a wooden storage box built into the fence structure that wasn't visible from the outside. Inside it were photographs, a notebook with dates, times, and written observations, and a second notebook going further back. She chose her words carefully, said the documentation suggested a pattern of behavior that significantly predated my parents leaving for Europe, that the records went back further than that summer, and that they went back further than when I came home from college. I asked her how far back. She said she wasn't able to share the full contents with me at the time and that a detective would be in touch with my parents directly. She said they were arresting Mr. Hessler and that I should consider staying somewhere else for the night. I called my parents while she was sitting there, and they cut off the trip and flew home. My dad asked me when he got back if I wanted to know everything they found. I said I didn't know. He said the detective had advised them that some of what was in those notebooks was information they would all be better off not having in full detail, and that he was inclined to follow that advice. I've never gone back to that house to stay. My parents are selling it. I grew up in that backyard, learned to swim in that pool, spent every summer of my childhood 20 feet from that fence. I don't know what's in those notebooks, and I don't know when it started or what exactly he was recording or how many summers are documented in that box he built into the fence, like he was planning to stay forever. My dad said the detective told him the records went back at least 7 years. I was 14 7 years ago. I don't let myself think past that point. There's a line I've drawn, and I stay on this side of it because the other side is somewhere I'm not able to go and function. He brought a casserole to my dad's retirement party. I don't know why I always come back to that, and I don't know what to do with it except write it down and hope that someday it stops being the first thing I think of when I wake up in the morning. It hasn't stopped yet. So this happened almost 20 years ago when I was a young 15-year-old girl. I had an older neighbor who taught drums and was a friend of my family's, and I would take drum lessons from him once a week. He only lived like 2.5 blocks away, so I would always walk, and he and his family lived at the end of the cul-de-sac. Well, one summery day when I was walking home at like 4 p.m., broad daylight in a quiet neighborhood, there was a strange man standing across from the end of the cul-de-sac. He had on a big cowboy hat, which was odd for my area, and some facial hair. I don't know, maybe his 30s, and he was just staring at me. He was watching me unabashedly as I walked down the cul-de-sac and crossed the street, and once my back was to him, I could hear that he was following me. My heart sped up. My drumstick seemed like weak protection, and I was wearing these thin little flip-flops, and I remember thinking if I had to kick him, they weren't going to help me much. Less than half a block away from me was a busier street, and I remember thinking if I could just get to the street where people could see me, he'd be sure to back off, but his steps sounded closer, and I could taste my panic knowing I wasn't going to make it. I ended up running up to a house where I kind of knew the family, and I knew a mom with young kids was probably there, and pounded on her door. Tried to open it myself even in my panic. She opened it, and I spilled into her house and locked the door, told her what had happened, and let my heart calm down a little bit. After being inside for maybe 15 minutes, I asked if I could just hop her back fence to go home since it would cut out a block of travel, but when we slid back the drapes of her back door, the dude was leaning against the fence right outside her house where he could see both the front and back door. She ended up loading her kids in the car and driving me home, and later had her husband ask around. It turned out the dude was living with his mother and had just gotten out of jail. I don't know the charges. All I know is that my stomach had been twisted in knots, and it was the first time I tasted beer like that. I don't know what would have happened if he had caught me. This happened close to 20 years ago. I was visiting my parents at their house for a week sometime in late spring and early summer. One morning, my mom woke me up and asked me to come out to the front yard to look at something. Her tone tipped me off to the fact that she was unnerved by whatever it was she had found. She was standing at the end of our sidewalk when I joined her, where she pointed to something where the sidewalk abutted the driveway. Is that what I think it is? It was a trail of dried or drying blood. I could see a few splatters of blood trailing out into the unpaved driveway, but they were hard to discern against the reddish clay and sand of the drive. I soon lost the trail, although the general trajectory was towards the road in front of the house. The other end of the trail led down where the sidewalk turned to run towards the gate between the house and the garage. Enough blood had been lost for there to be large splotches visible on the liriope that borders the sidewalk, as well as on the small patch of lawn between the sidewalk and the north side of the house. The trail led to the holly hedges that grow next to the house. Some of the branches on one of the bushes were bent and broken, the leaves smeared with blood, as was the side of the house behind the holly bush, and there was a sizable, maybe 10 to 12 inch across stain on the soil beneath it. The ivy on the fence next to the bush was also spattered, with some leaves entirely coated with blood. For context, my parents' house lives in a small town. The house and garage are separate structures, with an ivy-covered chain-link fence running between the house and garage to separate the front yard from the back. The lot faces the main north/south road through the town, while behind the lot is a street that runs north between their lot and a neighbor's house. Then it makes a sharp turn to the west, away from my parents' yard. Following that street leads you to another neighborhood on the right, while the left side of the street is bordered by a heavily wooded area that eventually connects with a large swath of mostly unpopulated forest and swamp. From the amount of blood by the holly, we judged that somebody had been hidden there for a little while. Some of the ivy was pulled away from the fence between the house and garage, so it was clear this person had climbed over the fence. From there, the trail became so much clearer as it went across the concrete patio between the house and garage. There's a window AC unit sticking out from the window just past the fence, and on the other side of it, there was much more blood drying in a pool on the patio as well, as more smears higher up on the wall of the house. Again, it looked like the person had hidden there behind the AC unit for a while, and by this point we were certain that it was a person and not an animal, partly because of the sheer amount of blood, and partly because of the smears on the side of the house were up higher, as if a person had leant against the house with blood on their hands or upper body. The trail then picked up again, but with smaller spatters, as if they had managed to control the bleeding somewhat. The track went across the patio and out into the backyard, where it was difficult to follow through the grass. At the far back fence, some of the honeysuckle vines that grew over the fence had been pulled, and the fence was bent, as if somebody had climbed over it there, and again, there were some smears of blood on the vines, from the trail that ran out into the street behind my parents' house, where it became nearly invisible to follow. It was pretty clear that somebody had been injured and was trying to hide, which implied that somebody had also caused the injury and was looking for them. Whatever the injury was, it must have been fairly serious because they lost quite a bit of blood in my parents' yard alone. They had come down the driveway from the main road, and they clearly knew that they could cut through the yard to reach the back street in the neighborhood or the forest beyond. My dad asked the night security guards of local school if he'd heard anything on the police scanners that night about anything weird going on, but the guard hadn't heard anything. My mom told me a few days later that the neighbor who lives on the street behind them told her that he had insomnia that night and had heard someone running down the street around 3 a.m. and also seen a dark-colored truck make several slow passes up and down the street. I'd asked my parents if they wanted to call the police to report, but whatever this was, they were both in their late 60s at the time, and I worried about them having be alone while there were creepy things, presumably involving violence, that were clearly going on right outside their house. My mom declined, not only because there was nothing the police could do, but also because she worried the police might have been involved somehow with what had happened. The local cops had a reputation for being corrupt, so she didn't want to have any sort of involvement. So I took the hose and a scrub brush and did my best to wash away all the traces of whatever it was that had happened the previous night. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well for the remainder of that trip home, nor on the subsequent visits. It was kind of like being in a house in a slasher film. Not the house where the actual violence takes place, but the one down the street where the hero or heroine of the movie runs and hides outside while being pursued by the killer, and the neighbor only finds out the next morning off screen that something bad was happening just outside while they slept. Definitely a creepy feeling, and much closer than I ever want to be to that kind of situation.